Hello class, welcome to Unit 2.5a, Percents and Equations. Okay, so before we get started here, let's look at a couple keywords. The first one being of. The of portion typically stands for your whole or the total, where the percent, this is a part over whole. Now this also refers to your percent value over 100, because percents are always out of 100%. Now the is, that typically represents the part of the whole, and typically you'll see a what, which would mean your variable, what you're looking for. So there's two ways of setting these up. One is going to be by an equation, where if you see the percent times the total equals part. Now I like this equation here when you are trying to say, oh, what is 20% of your total bill? And anytime it's saying percent times total, that's going to be nice, because we also know we can write our percents as a decimal times a number, and it just makes them pretty easy. So we'll use that like once or twice. But typically, I like looking over here at your proportional setup. Because if you can remember that percents are always out of 100, we are going to set that equal to the part of the whole, which is what a fraction is. Your part is always going to be on the top out of the whole, and then that should always be proportionally set up to the percent out of 100. Now once you get to that point, we need to make sure that we are, no matter which one we do, whichever way we solve, we're filling in that info. Now if we're using proportional, that means we're going to cross multiply to solve. Otherwise, if we're looking at the equation, use what we know about equations to use your inverse operations to solve. So let's take a look at a few examples. Now when we look at option A, we're going to look at both ways to set this up, and then you'll make a decision which one you want to use moving forward. But when we're looking at 18% of 81 is what number? This actually is the favorite setup that I would use with the equation. Because what we're really looking at here is if we can see that percent, which is 18%, so if we're using that relationship, 18 over 100, of is going to mean times 81 is going to be equal, and what number? That's really just going to be like our x. So this one here is my favorite case when to use this equation, because really all we need to do is plug this into our calculator, 0.18, using what we know about percentages, times 81, and this is going to tell us what that number is. So plug that in your calculator, and we get x equaling 14.58. Now, if we use our other method, which would be the is over of equaling percent over 100, we're going to use a similar thing, similar setup. X is going to be one of them, but we need to kind of put our things in place. So 18% over 100, because we know percents are out of that, and you're always looking at your is and your of. Now, a lot of times your of 81, well, that is going to be your whole, because we're trying to find the percent of that. The is would be the what number, so that's what we're going to call x. Now, if we go ahead and solve this, what we're going to find out is this is where we're doing our cross multiplying. So we got that 100x, and we got the 81 times 18 equaling 1,458. And then if we divide by 100, that's where we can solve now for x and find out that that is going to be 14.58. All right. Also with that, we have that little trick by dividing by 100, which is really just a fancy way of saying, let's move that decimal place twice. So there it is. After here, you'll, have your choice of picking which method you like the best, and we'll see what happens. So when I solve these, I tend to like the is over of equals percent over 100. Because all we really need to do when we look through these is basically try to figure out what is missing. We know the 0.6 is the is, because it's telling us 0.6 is 40% of your number. So the 40 is always going to go with the 100. So that's really just leaving us with the question of
what number being x. So if we kind of fill those in, this just goes back to our proportional multiplying, where we can cross multiply. Now I always show this as a little heart. So 0.6 times 100, which would be 60. And then x times 40, that equals 40x. Well, once you get this equation set up, all we really need to do is kind of plug these numbers in, and now we know that we solve by dividing, and that's going to leave us with an x equaling 1.5. So 0.6 is 40% of 1.5. So let's take a look at another one. Now we're asking ourselves what percent, which we don't know, but we know the percent is always in the x, and of 250 and is 150. So 150 is 250, and the percent, well, we don't know what that is. All we know is we're going to have to cross multiply and solve. So we got 150, 2 zeros, equals 250x. And now we have a little equation to solve. So if that's multiplying, we are going to divide both sides by 250. And x is going to equal 60. So that is going to be 60% of the 250 is 150. And we'll take a look at one more. Again, if we're going to look at the is over of equaling the percent over 100, what number is 25% of 55? So when we start plugging this stuff in, we always know the percent goes over 100. Right here is telling us of 55. And then if we look at this problem, it's saying what number is. So we don't know what is. So we're going to make it x. Well, let's solve this up again by cross multiplying. 100 times x. 55 times 25. 1375. And if we divide by 100, again, the little shortcut there is move your decimal 2 places. And that's going to leave us with x equaling 13.75. So that is telling us 13.75 is 25% of 55. So we'll take a look at a few practice problems. Now, if you're interested in those equations, we'll be glad to kind of talk about them in class. But for the most part, get really good at this is over of equaling percent over 100. Once we do that, we got some mini cross multiplying and solving an equation, and you'll be getting your answers in no time. So let's take a look at a few practice problems. Use these problems here to practice what we just talked about, get them set up, and good luck.